You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we have a really bizarre occurrence that took place in court today against Trump's DOJ, where a defendant actually asked the judge to detain him rather than be left to the devices of Trump's Department of Justice. Can you explain what happened here?
Brian, I can try. In the Abrego Garcia case, he is currently being held in connection with a criminal case in Tennessee. Of course, he is also potentially pending deportation if Donald Trump's DHS gets a hold of him again. And as of right now, the status of his criminal case in Tennessee is he had a detention hearing and the judge said, you know what? DOJ didn't prove what it needed to prove, so I'm going to order you released. And here's something that I don't think I encountered in my 30 years as a prosecutor. He and his attorneys just asked the judge to detain him rather than release him. If there is one universal truth, defendants usually ask to leave prison, not to stay in prison.
Right.
However, Abrego Garcia and his lawyers know full well that they cannot trust the Trump administration, the Department of Justice, or the Department of Homeland Security not to take him and deport him again in violation of his due process rights, perhaps right back to El Salvador, where in 2019, a judge issued an order saying the Trump administration is prohibited from deporting him to El Salvador. So rather than run that risk, he said, you know what, Judge, I want you to extend my detention because, and here, let me just read a sentence or two from the new court order granting his motion to remain detained. The judge said that pending before the court is the defendant, Kilmar Abrego Garcia's emergency motion to delay issuance of order of release due to the government's, meaning the Trump administration's, contradictory statements. That motion is granted. And the judge further explains that the court has considered the basis for Abrego Garcia's motion, which is the perceived conflicting positions taken by the government, the Trump administration, the Department of Justice, regarding whether it will deport Abrego pending final disposition of this case. Brian, that's something else I never saw in a court order. The court is granting the motion of Abrego Garcia because the government can't get its act straight. They're presenting conflicting stories about what they might do with Abrego Garcia. Now, let me just lay things out procedurally. You can be sort of detained in two cases at once. Right now, he's detained in his criminal case in Tennessee, which is the one that Pam Bondi's DOJ ginned up, I would even say trumped up as a vehicle to bring him back from El Salvador. And there's not enough evidence to detain him in that case, but presently he's being detained. If he's released in that case, DHS has already said, okay, then we will take him directly and confine him in connection with his deportation case. Right now in the criminal case, he's being detained technically by the United States Marshals. Those are the ones who detain and control federal prisoners in criminal cases. They said, okay, we will have an uninterrupted chain of detention for him if you release him in his case in Tennessee. We will take him. We will take him into DHS custody, and we just very may well deport him, including to El Salvador, where he is already established he is at risk of torture, persecution, or worse. And because of those conflicting and contradictory statements about whether they will deport him, whether they won't deport him, he said, you know what, Judge? Just leave me in jail until the Department of Justice and DHS can get its act together.
So do we have an idea of what the judge is actually going to rule here? Do we have any indication as to whether they're gonna acquiesce to Kilmar Abrego Garcia's request?
Yeah, the judge granted the request today in a 4-page order and said he will now be detained in the criminal case in Tennessee, even though there really is no basis, as the judge ruled previously, until July 16th, which is the next
It's basically
court.
just to keep him safe at this point. I mean,
Brian,
it's basically housing.
You're exactly right. It's almost protective custody against the federal government. It's not bizarre. It's exactly where we are. We're talking about, alligator Alcatraz in the Everglades, for gosh sakes.
Right.
And for a federal judge to say, you know what, I already ruled there's no basis for detention, but I'm going to keep you safe, in essence, and not turn you over to DHS and let them violate your due process rights all over again. And in fact, the judge said in this ruling, and I can almost quote it verbatim without looking at it, Abrego Garcia is simply looking to have his due process rights honored.
Glenn, I got to ask, is there a world in which Kilmar Abrego Garcia gets out at the end of this? Like if he goes through the process of these charges in Tennessee, which to your exact point are completely ginned up, they're completely trumped up, it's just some pretense to be able to bring him back and get him right back into the legal system. So if and when that falls apart, I'm assuming that there's no pretext to be able to incarcerate him based on that. And then does he have to go through the process to get him to free himself, go through the whole lengthy legal process in his DHS deportation case? But is there a way that he can actually come out the other end of this thing and just live a normal life, follow the law, continue to be with his family, and won't face the threat or the reality of a deportation?
Yeah, it's a good question, Brian. I would say there's a possibility, but not a probability. And here's why I say that. He's going to be subject to deportation proceedings, as he was previously back in 2019. Of course, at that point, the court ordered that the government was prohibited from deporting him to El Salvador, and he remained in the United States. He remained in the community, not detained, and basically he was awaiting further action by the United States government in his deportation matter. So what will happen if the criminal case in Tennessee, let's say it just falls apart, so there is no longer a vehicle or any authority for the judge to keep him detained. If the case goes away, you can't keep somebody in detention, even if they want to be held in detention to protect against an abusive federal government. That's not going to happen. Then they will take him into detention in his deportation case. But here is the thing. Because we know he was on release in the community, not detained previously in his deportation case, his attorneys, I promise you, Brian, will make the argument, judge, to the immigration judge, why shouldn't you restore him to the exact same status he was in before the Trump administration acted unlawfully and unconstitutionally against him, grabbed him, stuffed him on a plane, and wrongfully deported him to El Salvador? He was on release in the community before they acted against him unlawfully. You should restore him to that exact same status while his deportation matter gets litigated in court. Now, if the deportation matter gets fully litigated and Abrego Garcia has his opportunity to be heard, which is what the constitutional due process protections provide, and the judge orders him deported, well, then that is a lawful order of deportation. And then the only remaining question will be, to which countries can he not be deported? We know he can't go to El Salvador in accordance with a prior court order. But listen, if they abide by his constitutional rights and he's ordered deported, so be it. Deportation is an important and legitimate law enforcement tool that we need here in the United States, typically to guard against, violent criminals who have come here illegally and then been convicted of crimes, have served a sentence, and typically after they complete their sentence, that's when they get deported. But you know what? You've got to follow the damn rules, the law, and the Constitution.
Yeah, I think the reality is that it's not, clearly this is not about his behavior. I think that this is just about what Kilmar Abrego Garcia represents to the Trump administration. And so they have a personal vendetta against him because of what he represents. He represents the broader immigration fight and their unchecked ability to be able to wield immigration as a tool against anyone and everyone. And so because of who he is, not necessarily because of what he's done, because clearly they can't find anything, but because of who he is, they've just decided that this is going to be their scapegoat. This is going to be the boogeyman. And so they will stop at nothing to make sure to get him out of the country.
And Brian, can I follow up on that? Because it's such an important point, but something we haven't touched on yet. Abrego Garcia has been convicted of no crime until they ginned up this recent indictment based on a 2022 traffic stop in Tennessee that he didn't even get a traffic ticket for. He's never been indicted for a crime, and I don't view this as a legitimate indictment, the one that's pending against him in Tennessee now. But guess what? One of the most important cooperating witnesses who is allegedly providing incriminating information against Abrego Garcia, guess what? He has been deported and unlawfully come back into our country several times. He is convicted of discharging a weapon in Tennessee under dangerous circumstances. He was serving a sentence, and guess what happened to him? The Department of Justice just said, you're going to provide us incriminating information about Abrego Garcia. We're going to get you out of prison.
Right.
We're going to endanger the community. We're going to keep you here and not worry for the time being about your pending deportation. They're actually using people who are endangering the community and who have been convicted of crimes to try to get Abrego Garcia, who has never been convicted of anything.
Right. I mean, it's all about the narrative. If it was about the merits, not in a million years would you release somebody who's actually committed crimes because they gave you some incriminating evidence on somebody who doesn't pose a risk to the community. But again, this is all about messaging. It's all about optics for the Trump administration. This is not about the merits. It was never about the merits. You know, they came into office with this idea that they're only going after hardened criminals and they weren't getting enough people. So now it's just everybody. I mean, they're chasing people down in fields where they're picking the food that Americans eat. They're chasing people out on construction sites where they're building the homes that Americans live in. They're chasing people out of restaurants where they're cooking the food that Americans also eat. I mean, this is all just part of some cruel narrative that Republicans in the Trump administration are perpetuating. And here, this is just part of the story. I mean, like I mentioned before, Kilmar Abrego Garcia represents the fight against the whole immigration sector. And so they will do whatever they have to do because it's not about the merits of this specific situation. It's not about the legality of this specific situation. It is about being able to say that you've notched some win against public enemy number one, and they've deemed him public enemy number one. They've made him the boogeyman, and so that's the person that they're going to blindly go after because of what he represents more broadly. And it's a sad testament to what this government has devolved into under the Trump administration. But look, a lot to come as it relates to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. We will continue to cover every twist and turn of these multiple cases that are happening simultaneously right now. The one in the broader case that I think is taking place in the D.C. Court system, and then of course the criminal case that's happening in Tennessee. So for those who are watching right now, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, and it's the best way to support our work. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.